Hi everyone, my name is Bushra. I am a licensed social worker. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about trauma-informed resilient schools. So to get us started, I'm going to be talking about the definition of trauma. So this definition is provided by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and it reads, individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or a set of circumstances experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, with lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So, to understand what trauma really does to a person and how it impacts their physiology, their biology, we need to talk about trauma in the brain. There's three main parts in the brain that really influence trauma response. Those three parts are the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. I'm going to start with the amygdala, which is our fear center. So this is the center of our brain that is responsible for things like storing memories, our fight or flight response, and when a traumatic event is experienced, this part of the brain becomes overactivated. So it makes things such as like calming down, feeling safe, really difficult for the person to manage. So the next part of our brain that I'm going to talk about is the hippocampus, which is the part of our brain that is the emotion regulation center. It's what helps us regulate memories and emotions, and during a traumatic experience or event, the hippocampus becomes underactivated, so it makes it difficult to manage and cope with the emotions. And the last part of the brain that I'm going to be talking about is the prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking center. It's the part of our brain that's responsible for thinking, logic, evaluation, concentration, learning, and also during a traumatic event like the hippocampus, this part of the brain also becomes underactivated. So it becomes difficult to concentrate, difficult to learn. So as you can see in the brain, what happens is that our learning and our ability to cope with emotions and memories becomes underactivated, and what becomes overactivated is our fear response. So that's what initiates the fight, flight, or freeze response, and that might be where the person who has experienced a traumatic event might be operating from. I'm going to go right along and talk about the learning brain versus the survival brain, a little bit about what we just spoke about with the amygdala and what it does to the brain. The survival brain becomes hyper-focused on threat. So while the learning brain might be open to new information, it might be open to ambiguity, the survival brain is uncomfortable with ambiguity. It doesn't like, the uncertainty or the unknown. It's afraid of making mistakes. It's afraid of looking stupid, doubts ability to learn, and emotionally it's very panicky, thinks in black and white. The learning brain, on the other hand, right, is the opposite of that. It's emotionally very calm, it's peaceful, it's curious, and it's not afraid of making mistakes. So how does all of this show up, right, with our students, with our clients, whoever that we're working with? I'm going to talk specifically about how trauma symptoms can present in the classroom, but this can apply to many different populations, many different, clients, settings, whatever it may be. Especially right now, due to COVID, there's been a really long impact of traumatic experiences that many individuals have been facing. So this might be showing up in different ways for those folks. But some of the more specific ways that trauma can impact students and behaviors can start presenting in classrooms can include things such as trouble forming relationships with teachers, falling asleep in class, poor academic performance, student who was doing well previously starts to, not submit in their homework, not do their assignments, truancy, so not coming to classes, not coming to school, inability to focus or concentrate, right? And this directly aligns with the prefrontal cortex, right, which is underactivated. So it's difficult to learn, it's difficult to concentrate, and we can see that show up in how students are presenting in the classroom. Another thing is aggression or poor impulse control. Anger issues can also result, and this is directly tied to the amygdala, right, which is our fear center, which becomes overactivated. And so students who might not be feeling safe might be using anger or aggression, poor impulse control to protect themselves, to help regulate themselves. And last but not least, right, this list can go on, is difficulty working in groups or connecting with other students. So I spoke about, what is trauma, how the brain, what happens in the brain, and then how it shows up into the classroom or whatever setting you're working in. I'm going to talk about how to respond to trauma or someone who has experienced a traumatic event or experience. So I like to use the 4 R's. The first one is realize, recognize, respond, and then the last one is resist re-traumatization. So the first one, realize. We want to realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand potential paths for recovery. So what does that look like? Similar to what I just spoke about earlier, we want to recognize that, trauma has adverse effects on individuals' functioning in so many ways, as the definition earlier provided, right? It's not just physical or social, but it's both that, and it's also emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual, so it can show up in numerous ways. It can really impact a person's functioning or ability to show up day to day, and then it can also, going on to the next R, recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others involved in the system. So we want to recognize, 1, what is happening in the brain, which we spoke about today as well, and then how that impacts the symptoms or like the effects, the impacts that students are presenting in the classroom. So, right, what I just spoke about, difficulty with academic performance, inability to focus and concentrate, etc. Respond is the next one. So we want to respond by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into our policies, our procedures, and our practices. So I like to say this can look like a simple shift between asking like what is wrong with the student, or why is the student acting like this, into being more kindly curious about wondering what has happened to the student, what is something that they've experienced that is causing them to present in such a way. So this curiosity and this wanting to know before making assumptions or making judgments is a great place to start. And the last one, resist re-traumatization of children as well as adults who care for them, is really important because, if this one's not done, then there's no trauma-informed care really that's provided. So we want to make sure that we are being kind, we're being curious, we're not overstepping our boundaries when we're interacting with clients or students, etc. So that's kind of our presentation for today. I would like you all to think about, how does trauma impact the clients that you have? How do you see it showing up when you're working with them? Have you noticed the differences between the survival brain, right? If they've experienced a traumatic event versus like opportunities where the learning brain might be coming out? And then what are some of the symptoms that you're noticing? Is your client also presenting with things like aggression, inability to work in groups, whatever it may be, or are they presenting in different ways? And then spend some time also thinking about which 4 of these R's, right? So realize, recognize, respond, and resist. Have you already done, and which ones you would like to implement further on with your clients?